Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It's strange how the heart works, how temptation creeps into the quiet spaces of our lives when we least expect it. You think you know yourself, you think you know your limits, and then suddenly you're standing at the edge of a decision that changes everything. That's where my story begins, a story of love, desire, guilt, and the tangled web of secrets that can build inside a family when lines are crossed. I never thought I'd find myself in such a place. I was a woman in my early 40s, steady, responsible, someone who thought she understood what it meant to be faithful. But one mistake, one moment of weakness, can open doors you never imagined. He wasn't supposed to be more than a friend, someone who gave me attention when I felt invisible, someone who made me laugh when life at home felt heavy. And yet, the more time we spent together, the more I realized how dangerous it was to let those feelings grow. It started innocent, just conversations, long drives, and laughter that felt almost too easy. But what happens when someone makes you feel seen again after years of routine and silence? What happens when a spark becomes something you can't ignore? I knew I was walking into dangerous territory, but the comfort of his voice, the warmth of his hand, and the way he looked at me like I was still worth noticing, made me forget everything else. The truth is, love isn't always clean. Sometimes it's messy, complicated, and filled with choices that weigh heavily on the soul. I wasn't blind to the consequences. I knew I was risking the respect of my son, the trust of my family, even my own self-worth. But in that moment, I convinced myself that I deserved to feel alive again, that I deserved one night where I could forget the loneliness I carried inside. And then came the night I'll never forget. The night when passion drowned out reason, when I let myself fall deeper into a secret I could never explain. My heart was racing, torn between desire and dread, knowing how wrong it was but unable to stop. The world outside seemed quiet, almost too still, as if it knew something dangerous was about to unfold. But then, just as the room filled with that dangerous mix of comfort and guilt, there was a sudden knock at the door. A voice I knew better than any other called out, and in that single instant, everything inside me froze. My son's voice. My reality crashing in. My heart nearly stopped beating as I realized the secret I had been hiding was about to be exposed in the worst way possible. The sound of that knock still echoes in my mind, even now. It wasn't just the sound of someone at the door, it was the sound of reality intruding on a fragile secret I had been keeping, a reminder that life doesn't let you escape so easily. I didn't answer right away, because I couldn't. My breath was caught in my throat, my body frozen, and my thoughts racing with fear. I whispered to myself, wondering how I had ended up in that moment, so torn between passion and guilt. To understand how it all came to that point, you'd have to know what life was like before. I had been married for years, and though my husband was still present in the house, he wasn't truly present with me anymore. Days blurred into nights filled with silence, with him lost in his own world, and me quietly yearning for something more. I wasn't searching for trouble, and I certainly wasn't looking to complicate my life. But loneliness has a way of breaking down even the strongest walls. That's when he appeared. He was younger than me, in his mid-30s, confident yet gentle in a way that caught me off guard. He didn't rush conversations or speak over me like so many others did. Instead, he listened, really listened. It was his attention that drew me in at first, but then it became the way he smiled, the way he carried himself, and the way he made me feel like I still mattered. At first, it was easy to tell myself we were just friends. But deep down, I knew I was crossing a line with every message, every phone call, every moment that felt a little too close. We would meet sometimes for coffee, and those afternoons became the highlight of my week. I'd tell myself it was harmless, but my heart knew better. The warmth in his eyes lingered longer than it should have, and the way he brushed his hand against mine left a spark that I tried to ignore. It was both thrilling and terrifying, like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing one step forward could change everything. The more time we spent together, the more the world outside of us began to fade. I started to crave his presence, to look forward to those stolen moments that felt like they belonged to no one but us. The truth is, I hadn't felt that alive in years. Every word he spoke seemed to peel away the layers of loneliness I had been carrying, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen, heard, and wanted. But behind every smile, behind every shared laugh, there was a shadow of fear. I knew the stakes. I knew that if anyone found out, especially my son, it would break everything apart. That's why the knock on that door shook me to my core. Because in that single moment, the walls of secrecy I had built felt like they were about to come crashing down. I still remember the way my heart pounded, louder than the sound of his voice calling from the other side. I thought of how he would look at me if he knew the truth. Would there be disappointment in his eyes? Would he ever forgive me? These questions haunted me, and yet, even with all the fear, I couldn't deny the feelings that brought me there in the first place. I was caught between the comfort of the past and the danger of something new. Between what I owed to my family and what I longed for deep in my soul. That night was just the beginning of a storm I never saw coming. And what happened after that knock was something I never could have prepared for. I didn't open the door that night. I couldn't. My voice caught in my throat as I whispered something back to my son, pretending I was too tired, pretending that I would talk to him later. My hands trembled, and I knew he could probably hear the strain in my voice, but he didn't push. He just said goodnight and walked away. The sound of his footsteps fading down the hall was both a relief and a reminder that this secret had a heartbeat of its own, one that could explode at any second. After that night, nothing felt the same. Every time I looked at my son, I felt a weight pressing against my chest. He had always trusted me, always believed I was the steady one who held everything together. And now, every smile I gave him, every ordinary conversation we had, felt laced with a lie. The guilt was sharp, but alongside it was another truth I couldn't ignore, the longing that had led me into that secret room in the first place. He, the man I had allowed into my heart, didn't make it easier. If anything, his presence made the conflict inside me grow stronger. He would call me in the mornings just to hear my voice. He would send little notes that made me blush like a teenager again. And yet, behind all the sweetness was a danger we both understood. One careless move, one person seeing us together, and everything would come crumbling down. There were days I thought about ending it, about pulling away before it went any further. I would sit in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, telling myself I had to make a choice. But then my phone would light up with his name, and all my resolve would vanish. That was the power he had over me. It wasn't just attraction, it was the way he made me feel alive again. And once you taste that kind of freedom, it's hard to let it go. Meanwhile, my son grew more curious. He started asking small questions, where I had been, who I was talking to when I smiled at my phone, why I seemed distracted. His words weren't sharp, but there was something in his tone that made me nervous. I could tell he was watching me more closely, like he sensed something wasn't quite right. That added another layer to the conflict, because it wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about protecting my relationship with him, the one bond one couldn't imagine breaking. And yet, even with all that fear, I kept finding myself drawn back into that dangerous connection. The secret meetings, the stolen moments, the way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world, it was intoxicating. I kept asking myself if this was worth it, if risking everything I had built was worth the fire I felt when I was with him. But the heart doesn't always wait for answers. It just pulls you where it wants to go. There were nights I lay awake, torn between two worlds. One where I stayed safe, kept the secret buried, and pretended everything was fine. And another where I allowed myself to fall deeper into something I knew could destroy me. The conflict wasn't just between right and wrong, it was between the life I had and the life I secretly craved. And all the while, the knock at that door still haunted me. It was a reminder that secrets never stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, the truth has a way of showing itself. The days that followed felt like walking on a thin sheet of glass. Every sound in the house, every glance from my son, every unanswered question seemed sharper, heavier. I carried the secret in my chest like a ticking clock, knowing it was only a matter of time before the hands struck midnight. I tried to go about life as if nothing had changed, cooking dinner, folding laundry, laughing at simple jokes, but deep inside, I was waiting for everything to crack. The man who had pulled me into this whirlwind didn't make it easier to stay hidden. He wanted more of me, More time, more connection. His voice over the phone grew bolder, asking when we could meet again, when I would finally stop pretending that what we had was just temporary. There was warmth in his words, but there was also a kind of urgency, as though he feared I would slip away if he didn't hold on tight enough. And that urgency started to spill into my everyday life, into the moments when I was supposed to be someone's mother, someone's wife. The tension at home was building too. My son had grown distant, quiet, but not in the way that comes from indifference. It was the kind of quiet that comes from suspicion, from noticing things he couldn't quite put into words. Sometimes I caught him watching me, his eyes searching my face as if he could read the truth if he stared long enough. Those moments made my heart pound harder than any stolen kiss ever had. One evening, the conflict came closer than ever. My son walked into the living room unexpectedly, and my phone lit up in my hand with his name, the man who had become my secret. I quickly turned the screen down, but not before my son caught the flicker of my expression, the way my eyes betrayed the panic inside me. He didn't say anything, not right away. He just looked at me, and in that silence, I felt like I had already been discovered. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of two worlds was pressing down on me, the world I had built for years and the world I was slipping into without meaning to. My mind kept replaying the sound of that first knock on the door, the moment everything nearly came crashing down. It was a warning, and I knew another moment like that was coming. Only next time, I might not have the chance to cover my tracks. The air in the house felt different, charged, like the calm before a storm. Every instinct in me told me something was about to happen, something I couldn't avoid no matter how hard I tried. And when it did, it wouldn't just be about me anymore. It would shatter everything around me. I thought the tension in my house couldn't get any heavier, but I was wrong. Just when I felt like I was barely holding everything together, another twist appeared, something I never saw coming. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, my phone buzzed again. I expected it to be him, the man who had become my secret, but instead it was a message from an unknown number. The words on the screen made my blood run cold. "Does your family know who you've been meeting?" At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake, maybe a cruel prank. But then another message came, this time with a photo. It wasn't scandalous, but it was clear enough. It showed me and him together, walking out of a cafe, smiling at each other, his hand just brushing against mine. Anyone looking at that picture would see more than just friendship. My chest tightened. Someone knew. Someone was watching. That second plot twist changed everything. It wasn't just about hiding from my son anymore. Now there was someone else, someone unseen, holding a piece of the truth that could destroy me. My thoughts spiraled. Who could it be? A neighbor? A friend? Someone close enough to know my schedule, close enough to snap that photo without me noticing. The fear made me restless, but underneath it, there was something else, anger. Because now, my secret wasn't just mine anymore. I didn't tell him right away. I wanted to, but the words stuck in my throat. He noticed, of course. He always noticed. He asked why I seemed distracted, why my voice sounded distant when we spoke. I brushed it off, but I could hear the worry building in his tone. And that worry only pulled me closer to him, even as the danger grew. It was strange how the threat of losing everything only made the desire stronger, the connection deeper. At home, the silence with my son grew even heavier. He still hadn't confronted me, but his eyes said more than words ever could. Sometimes I thought he might already know. Sometimes I wondered if the unknown number could even be him. The idea scared me most of all. Because if it was, that meant my secret had already exploded in the one place I couldn't survive losing. The days blurred into nights filled with paranoia. Every knock on the door, every phone call, every unexpected sound made me jump. It felt like I was living in two storms at once, the storm of forbidden love pulling me deeper, and the storm of truth pressing hard against the walls of my life. I couldn't escape either one. Then came the night that escalated everything. My phone rang again, late, when the house was quiet. It was the same unknown number. This time, the message wasn't a threat, it was a warning. If you don't stop, your family will find out everything. My hands shook as I read the words. Whoever this person was, They weren't just watching. They were waiting for me to make the next move. That message changed the game. Now it wasn't just about love and guilt, it was about survival. It was about choosing between protecting my family's trust and holding on to the one person who made me feel alive again. The stakes had never been higher, and I knew the next step I took would push me closer to the breaking point. The night the truth finally broke open was nothing like I imagined. It didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, like a storm creeping in under the cover of darkness. I was in the kitchen when my son walked in, holding my phone in his hand. His face was pale, his eyes sharp, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then he placed the phone on the table, screen lit up with the messages from that unknown number. "Who's been sending you these?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying a weight I had never heard before. My breath caught. I realized he had seen everything, the warnings, the photos, the words that tied me to the man I had been trying to keep hidden. There was no more pretending. My secret had slipped from the shadows into the harsh light of his gaze. I wanted to explain, to tell him the whole story of how loneliness had led me down a dangerous path, how feeling invisible had pushed me to search for warmth where I shouldn't have. But the words wouldn't come. All I managed was, "I'm sorry." His silence in response was louder than any anger could have been. Later that night, I met with him, the man who had become both my escape and my downfall. I told him everything about the messages, about my son, about how close everything was to unraveling. His expression hardened, but then he admitted something that shocked me even more. The unknown number, the one sending the threats, wasn't a stranger at all. It was his wife. She had found out long before I suspected, and she had been pulling the strings, waiting for me to break. That was the final twist, the piece of the puzzle that made everything snap into place. I wasn't just hiding from my family anymore, I had been walking straight into someone else's trap. The fear I felt in that moment was different, sharper. It wasn't just about being discovered, it was about realizing I was part of a story much bigger than my own. The climax came in the decision I had to make right then. I could keep running, keep clinging to a love that was tearing lives apart, or I could let it go before the damage became permanent. The choice burned inside me, but deep down I knew there was only one answer. Some truths can't stay hidden, and some hearts can't be healed by holding on. But here's the part one didn't expect. Walking away didn't end the story. It only opened another door, one I never thought I'd face. Because just when I thought the secret was over, I discovered my son wasn't as innocent in all this as I believed. He had known more, much more, from the very beginning. And that revelation changed everything again. When my son finally admitted what he knew, it shook me in a way no threat, no secret message ever could. He had seen the signs long before I thought he had, my distracted eyes, the hidden smiles, the late-night whispers on the phone. He didn't have every detail, but he had enough to put the pieces together. And the truth was, he hadn't confronted me because he didn't want to lose me. That broke me more than anything. The idea that my own choices had forced him into silence, carrying a burden no child should ever have to carry, filled me with a guilt I can't put into words. He told me that he had hoped I would stop on my own, that the messages from the unknown number would scare me straight. He had even suspected who was behind them, though he never said it aloud. Listening to him speak, I realized the damage wasn't just in the act of betrayal, it was in the way it had changed the trust between us. A mother and son's bond is supposed to be unshakable, yet mine had been bent under the weight of my secrets. That night, I made a choice. I cut ties with the man who had once made me feel alive. It wasn't easy. In fact, it felt like tearing out a piece of myself. But I knew holding on would only drag me and everyone I loved deeper into a place we couldn't escape. He didn't fight me. He looked at me, pain in his eyes, and simply said he understood. Maybe he knew, like I did, that love built on lies can't survive forever. The days after were quiet, but the silence was different. It wasn't filled with desire or guilt anymore. It was filled with healing. My son and I really talked, for the first time in what felt like years. We didn't solve everything overnight, but we started to rebuild, brick by brick, with honesty. The scars of what I had done would always remain, but scars are proof that wounds can close. As for his wife, the woman behind the messages, I never heard from her again. Maybe she felt she had one. Maybe she just wanted me to know that nothing stays hidden forever. Either way, I was strangely grateful. Her warnings, as cruel as they felt at the time, forced me to face the truth before it destroyed me completely. Looking back, I learned that loneliness can trick you into believing you need to step outside your life to find happiness. But sometimes the answers are right in front of you, in the people who love you most, if only you let yourself see it. The cost of secrets is always higher than the thrill of passion. So this is where my story ends, not with fireworks, not with happily ever after, but with lessons I carry with me every single day. And now I want to ask you, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have walked away sooner or risked everything for the feeling of being alive again? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to see this story continue in a sequel, let me know. I'd love to hear what direction you'd imagine next. Summary: this is the story of a woman who, trapped in loneliness, crossed boundaries that risked her family's trust. What began as an escape quickly spiraled into a web of secrets, threats, and heartbreak. When her son discovered the truth, everything unraveled, leading her to make a choice between forbidden love and rebuilding the bond that truly mattered. It's a story of romance, betrayal, guilt, and redemption, proving that no secret stays hidden forever. 2.